Welcome, everybody. Our first of 2021 Asks and Praxis session, and it's a look back, right? 2020 was an interesting year, unprecedented, tough, whatever adjective you want to use, but Microsoft didn't stop shipping and moving forward and stuff. So we wanted to use this session as a recap of the favorite things that we saw in Microsoft 365 in 2020. So obviously we'll do it from our own individual roles. We all kind of approach it a little bit differently. And this is about a few of our favorite things, right, for Microsoft 365. So it's basically what we did to prepare for this is we put together hey, in case you missed it, here are our favorite things from 2020. And we can drill into any of these, but we wanted to leave it to folks who were joining us today to talk about which of these you would like to drill into, or your own topic. If you encountered something in 2020 that made you happy in Microsoft 365, let's talk about it. So before we dive into this, and I don't want to just step through a rote slide presentation, would love to hear from the folks on the line about what of these topics or of your own topics is of most interest to you.
I know for me, the hub sites inheriting permissions is the thing, is we're looking at implementing hub sites on a larger scale in our organization. So I'd be really interested to see a bit more about the permissions inheritance and how that works exactly. And I'll plug my other interests too of the SharePoint news, communications, and task management are kind of my ones that I'm interested in based on this list.
Cool. You're gonna be best friends with Emily. I think these are all.
I was just gonna say, and Emily will be leading the remainder of the day.
Right. Thank you all for coming. Yeah. Emily, it's all yours.
I'm fangirling Emily right now.
I can see we have a lot in common, Krista.
Shall we go into hub sites first?
Yeah, that one's actually Mark, so we'll let him kick off.
Oh, cool.
Ooh, okay. Mark. Oh, okay.
Yay me.
No.
Mark gets to talk.
So all this information is at that link at the bottom, which is important because I'm not going to try and get into every nook and cranny here. But I actually went through this earlier today because I hadn't done it, even though I know it's really important. It's a multi-step process, but it's relatively straightforward. So in the hub site, you have to turn on syncing permissions first. So you sort of have to enable that at the hub level so that associated sites can then take advantage of it. That makes sense to me because you really want to be able to, if you think about it, using this in different combinations might solve different problems. So by turning it on in the hub site, you then can sync the permissions to the associated sites. I couldn't find that. I needed to phone a friend and ask Emily where that setting was. I find it hidden in a very strange place. It's in the site permissions under a tab called Hub, as opposed to Hub settings, which is where I sort of thought it should be. Then in the associated site, you will, after that's turned on, see the red highlighted option, which is sync hub permissions to this site. So, if you think about using this with the hub site enabled, but only turning it on for some of the associated sites, you might hit some use cases, or turning it on for all of the associated sites if you wanted to. There are two places in the associated site that you can do this. The first one on the left, which is in the site information, which is where I thought it should be in the hub. And then also under site permissions, you can turn on syncing, which is, I believe, just the same toggle in a different place.
Hey, Mark.
And yep.
Is this something that's retroactive? So if you have a hub and 15 sites associated with it, can you turn it on and have it push down? Or is this something that you really need to think carefully about before you turn it on?
Well, the latter is definitely true. You want to think about it carefully before you turn it on. Obviously, it didn't exist before, so it has to be applicable in a retroactive way. What it does, I believe, is sort of layer the hub site permissions on top of the associated site. It doesn't replace everything, so it becomes a superset subset kind of thing, as opposed to now you're clobbering all the permissions in the associated sites. If you think about that, that has to sort of be the case, because if the associated site is a team site, it's got a Microsoft group that group has members. So that all still has to be in place. So I think it's an overlay, and that connection back to the hub site is always still understood. So then if you turn that sync off, those permissions would just be lifted off. And that also has to be the case because if you think about it, if we take that site and we associate it with a different hub, we need to take this hub stuff off, move it over, connect it to the other hub, and potentially overlay the hub site permissions from that hub. So this covers all of those use cases, which I think is pretty cool.
Mark, do we know, the way I interpreted this is that by syncing this, it's only syncing over the visitor permissions. Do we know if that's accurate?
I don't think that's right.
No, because yeah, never mind. Ignore what I was just about ready to say.
You've got me with something I don't know the answer to be honest, though.
Take that as a follow-up.
I'm testing it right now, and I'm thinking that might be right. And let me just pop a little screenshot into our chat here as we all learn together, because it does specifically call out hub visitors, and then you pick the group.
Right. Actually, you're correct, because when so in that article that I'm linking to, this is the paragraph that's operational here. It's in the chat. It increases access for viewers across all sites in the hub.
Yeah.
That makes sense, because one of the big issues with hub sites at the beginning, and I remember Sue ranting about this regularly, was that if you put links to some of the sites in your hub and then they'd click on the link and get a permission denied error. So like, I think this is probably something that's trying to address that, right? When that's just an oversight versus intentional.
Yeah.
I wonder how it works differently when you're talking about communication sites, though, because obviously me being me, I'm going to know nothing about this. But how, you know what I mean? When a communication site has groups, you're creating not an Office 365 group, but a group and a SharePoint group. And so, there can be many of those. It's probably just going to take the visitors group of the communication site.
It lets you choose, and you can pick that SharePoint group. So the screenshots that I just did were both from communication sites. Travel is my hub, and then Key West was my associated site.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
So it's even better, more options.
Nice.
I'm ready to play with this. Yeah, and so, Julie, to your point, the thing that I was going to say that you all wisely ignored was around groups and how that impacts groups, because groups can't have read-only folks, and I need to play with this in the context of groups some to get my head wrapped around it.
I see one big benefit on it from the communication site standpoint, since you're adding visitors. When I make the very common structure right now, because we don't have, associated hubs or hubs of hubs or out-of-the-box global nav, some smaller organizations just have one hub, right? And that might be their intranet, at least for their one hub for their comm sites. So then to not have to every single department communication site add whatever security enabled distribution list or any other way you're giving people permissions, just add them to that intranet hub and then have every single communication site inherit it. You're asking less of your subject matter experts in those departments who are managing the sites. They don't need to understand the permissions as much. You're doing that for them, which is really helpful.
Yeah, and that makes even more sense with it just being a viewer thing. You wouldn't want to be giving people edit rights down into these communication sites, but the viewing one makes a ton of sense. Like, I've got a new person, and so I'm going to, put them in my main hub group, and then they're there. That's powerful. That's good.
If Microsoft doesn't plan to sync the owners and members groups in the future, my recommendation would say sync hub visitors permissions to the sites and be really explicit about what it is.
Every word is a promise.
Yeah.
So in the interest of this hub sites topic, and in talking about maybe the things that we were hoping to see in 2020 that we didn't see, given that it's December the 44th right now, Mark, do you want to talk about hubs of hubs?
Sure. I love grousing about that. Yeah. So one of the things that was supposed to happen in 2020, one of the things that was supposed to happen in 2020 was hubs of hubs, or what the way I think about it is cascading hub sites, which gives us sort of brings us back to where we used to be with lots, a lot of pyramidical subsites of subsites of subsites, but in a more flexible way. And unfortunately, that hasn't shipped yet. I think I feel like that date's moved 4 times. I don't know how many times it's moved, but I believe it's on the roadmap now for this quarter, but I haven't looked in a few weeks. The idea there is the one that I think a lot of people want. Like you have an intranet, and maybe one of your top navigation items is projects or units of work that you do inside your organization, and you want to make that a hub site, and then associate, say, projects with that hub site, but have that part of your intranet cascading. So it's supposed to be coming. We don't really know what it's going to look like, because the longer it doesn't happen, the longer they have to make it work some other way that we haven't seen.
What's fantastic is that since I think it's late 2018, the underlying API architecture has been there. I think that's hilarious.
That's the worst.
It is totally the worst.
So the scaffolding's been built.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So did they, excuse me, on the hub of hubs, so did they, have they hinted on the structure of that? If you're trying to explain that, I guess I missed it, because I said in one of their meetings at the SharePoint conference in Vegas, where I signed an NDA not to talk about this, that they had different envisionings of how they were going to do the hub of hubs, basically. Yeah. And so they did decide on something that you can share, because I can't.
No, not that I know of.
Do we have anything that we know that we can share on that? Yeah.
Melissa, whose last name is
Hubbard? No.
Oh, I know who you mean, but I
Melly
don't know.
Hub. Melissa
Hubbard.
I can't remember her last name. Torres, is that right?
Hubbard. Melly Hub?
No. This is a Microsoft person.
No.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
I think you might be right.
The mother of hubs, Melissa Torres, I think is her name. She did a session on one of the PMP calls as a demo of this. Maybe while other people are talking, I can dig up that link. So they have shown, I believe demos when I actually see them working in my own tenant. And that was probably 4 or 5 months ago at this point. So there is stuff out there that's public, but not necessarily current.
Yeah, and Lou, to your point, I think that's probably why it's not out yet, is because they had different ways that they wanted to implement this, and they just haven't decided, or once they decide on one, it's got issues that they don't anticipate.
Yeah, and it's not only hard, but there's probably the demand is probably not that high for it.
Especially with the upcoming release of that SharePoint app bar. I know one of the reasons I wanted Hubs of Hubs was more specifically about global nav. So having this alternate approach might give you some of the things that you need that we were going to get with Hubs of Hubs.
I also think Hub of Hubs is going to just be dangerous. If we all harken back to the days when we had subsites of subsites of subsites, that was just a rat's nest of IA that just never went well, unless you had something super particular you were doing with it. But it just created a mess more often than it didn't. And it feels like if you can get the right navigation architecture down, you don't really need it. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah, there were some other organizations in that meeting with Microsoft on the hubs, and there were several that were really, really interested in getting this because of their tenants' usage and the large number of divisions and within the organizations and so forth. So, yeah, and I think you're right. It's again, if you got large numbers, then the complexity of rendering that hub of hubs probably gets computationally expensive, and the lag is going to be there.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've been running into is doing client migrations from on-prem to SPO, was that they're sold on the hub. So we're creating a communication site, and we have all these subsites that we're now creating standalone. And unfortunately, as you know, a lot of people didn't follow a lot of best practices around permissions of their sites. So a few I've done recently is just like there's no SharePoint groups being used, and they're inheriting from their parent. And so that's where I was hoping maybe this inheriting would help clean up some of that, so that I would have some of those subsites would inherit from the hub. The full fidelity, owners, members, visitors, at least have that option, so that I can keep things more consistent from that perspective. Though I'm sure that then opens another can of worms that I want to now take this site and associate somewhere else, but then maybe it should then inherit from that new hub.
I think one of the problems with things like this is they end up in this corner where they're trying to solve everybody's problem all the time, as opposed to having several different capabilities that we can choose from. And I mean, sometimes you see that be a delay. And then, of course, we always hear that we don't have enough resources to get it done discussion from them, which I have a little tougher time with.
So let's come back to our favorites, and I think we've got more Emily chapters in here.
I saw a list call too, as well. Somebody in the chat put lists up there. So we have Hubba Hubs, news and communication, lists. I think those were the three.
I can do mine pretty quick.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Here you go, Emily.
Yeah.
News and
then
comms.
We'll hop over to lists right after. So a couple of my favorite things from this year, stock images. When I'm working with a lot of different site owners, one of the biggest challenges is them finding licensed images that are effective, the correct size to put in page headers, communicate their messages. So having that embedded right into SharePoint, I think, is a huge benefit for all of these different site owners. Next one, please, Mike. All right, and then this one should start to play. If not, if you don't mind doing click, perfect. Page scheduling. So we had this in Classic, right? And this is just a little video of me going through and setting it up on in a news article, but having the ability to set, let's say news, for example, to be published at a certain date and time. We can stop setting our alarms and putting things on our calendars to pick the exact time a page is ready. And it gives a lot more freedom and flexibility to our different site owners to pre-do this work and then launch at a later date. Next one, please.
That has to be enabled on the pages library first, correct?
It does, yeah. That's what this.
On the
Exactly. The video is looping through. First, you do it in the pages library and then the page itself. You just have to toggle that on, kind of like you had for that hub inherit. Anytime you need, the next one we're going to look at, which is audience targeting, is also the same. You have to turn it on in whatever library you're going to use it on, and then again on in the web part you're using.
So you mentioned audience targeting.
I did.
How convenient.
Thank you. So audience targeting is awesome. We've all been, struggling together in that switch from classic to modern of, I want to put something in the nav. It's not relevant to everyone. I talk a lot about, that idea that your link is a promise that you can't break, right? That comes from Nielsen Norman Group originally, this idea that if we tell someone something that we need to deliver on it. So a lot of people have been using things like emojis to put a little lock icon or additional text, but now we can just actually show people what's relevant to them, which really aids in our ability to make the internet feel relevant to each person as they are logging in. So it's not just navigation, but you can do it to libraries. So I can audience target a confidential library in a team site that has a subset of people so that the larger team doesn't see it. I can audience target my pages, highlighted content web part, and news web part. All incredible, especially that news web part on your internet homepage, only presenting relevant information. And I'm really excited for 2021 to get some audience targeting on events and quick links, because again, I can see how helpful that is going to be just to make sure that we're really personalizing the content that we're showing the end users in our organizations.
Emily, I saw a couple people tweet today that the quick links audience targeting had shipped. At least they're seeing it in their tenants. Are you seeing it yet or no?
I'm so jealous. I checked at 8:30 a.m. and I did not. So fingers crossed, maybe I'll get it by the end of today. Who knows? I'm dreaming big in 2021. For the first time, I think.
Sorry, my audio is cutting in and out, so I'm getting pieces of what you're saying, but not all of it.
Yeah, it's you, Mike. Actually,
It's you, Mike. We all
Yeah.
we can all
Yeah,
hear
it's
each
always
other.
you, Mike.
Yeah, it's me. My audio.
I can't wait for Mike to rewatch this because this is so perfectly timed when it broke up. But I think moving on to lists.
All right, I'm back now, audio wise. Yeah.
Stephen Hawking. Oh, Jesus. Yes, Lou, exactly. Oh. All right, let's go to lists.
All right, that's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I skipped task management, but let's do it after lists.
Okay. So Microsoft Lists is actually one of those things that rolled out, and I'm like, why do they bother? What the hell is this? What's the point? And I've pretty quickly come around to the fact that there's a there. So what they've essentially done is decoupled the concept of a list from SharePoint itself. Now Microsoft Lists is a separately available service. So you can create a list in your own OneDrive. You can create a list that's in a SharePoint site, et cetera, et cetera. Fundamentally, they're still SharePoint lists. They're exactly what you know of as SharePoint lists. But you've probably noticed that lists in your tenant have gained some slightly different iconography, some slightly different look and feel to them that makes them work better on a mobile device or a smaller than desktop device, and also I think they've essentially replaced some of the underlying guts to make the lists themselves work better. Not the storage, but the layers in between, I believe. So the other thing that came along with that is a new set of templates, and those templates, I'm not usually a big fan of canned templates because they never quite match what we want, but I've seen a couple of times that these templates can be used as illustrations of what's possible, if nothing else. So for example, with one of our clients, I used the work progress.
Oh, we lost Mark.
Now it's Mark. Way to go, Mike.
Somebody mentioned.
Oh, there he is.
Hello?
Yep.
Hello?
Hey.
Okay. So for one of our clients, I've used the work progress tracker to demonstrate how task management might work in a SharePoint list, because that's essentially what it is. I think I have a second I have an animation here, Mike. Can you hit enter? Yeah, there you go. So this is the issue tracker. So you see, you get not just a template of sort of a flat, boring template, but you get a template that has evidence of some of the value-added capabilities, like column formatting. It just comes with that template. So it looks nice, it works well, it paints a picture of some of the possibilities, which I think can really be helpful. And there you go.
Mark, have you seen a lot of use of the creating a list from an existing list?
I've started to use it.
Yeah.
I can't remember, and only because I did this the last time a couple weeks ago. It doesn't let you reach across site boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Modern site boundaries, which is a little bit of a bummer, but it's absolutely helpful if you have a list within that site that you want to replicate.
Yeah. Yeah, I've used it for testing feedback. If I'm testing a new feature on this project and I had a good feedback list, real easy to replicate that and use a consistent format. It's super helpful.
I can't even count how many times they've reinvented that from Excel option.
Right.
We've had it, we've lost it, we've had it, we've lost it. So here it is in its new incarnation, and that is also very useful. And it's much better than any previous incarnation. It actually understands the data types that you've got in your sheet, things like that.
Yep. With our remaining time, we got about 5 minutes left. We want to drill back into task management.
Yep.
Sure.
And then we had a comment on task management too.
Oh, interesting. Emily, bad link. Sorry. There you go.
Awesome. Okay, so my favorite thing about task management from this year was that they actually started to create roll-ups where you could see everything that you had. So over in the chat, Greg made a comment about like, where am I putting what when? And one of the biggest challenges was you couldn't see them all together. So what just came out last month, actually, in my tenant at least, was this roll up of any to-do tasks assigned to you and any tasks assigned to you across all of Planner. So I wasn't checking in multiple places. Now, the tasks I make in my Outlook already automatically roll into to-do. So technically speaking, it's surfacing my Outlook tasks, my to-do tasks, as well as my Planner tasks. Coming soon in 2021, they're going to be supporting those app mentions where you might be getting emails for them now, and there's not much else to do. So I look forward to that a lot. So someone app mentioning me in a Word doc can actually become a task of something I need to complete. What is still sorely lacking is any kind of overview of the roll-ups for Planner to see from a project management perspective across all of the different plans. So let's say I am the accounting team manager and we have 4 different projects going on. I have to click into each Planner plan and see how those are doing. I don't have a way to see them all up together. That's still something that you would need to make or that you would need to use for Project Online for. So I'm going to paste into the chat a little bit of an eye chart that I've been working on across the different pieces of task management, just to call out some of those top features, as well as a little slide of the integrations.
You want me to stay on this slide, or you want me to toggle over to your eye chart?
Oh, I didn't even consider that. You could.
We've got just a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we get the questions in, so I don't want to go too deep here unless there are specific
is there
questions.
any more questions? Like, people should just come off mute, or they can type them in the chat if they're shy. No big deal. So.
We did a task. I put a link to it in the chat, but we did a task management talk, Ask Some Praxis talk over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So if folks want to learn more about that, they can listen to that recording.
Thanks, Derek. What was the question, Julie, that's in the chat?
No, I said no. Emily already addressed it.
Okay.
It was just a comment, and she addressed it.
Cool. Anything else we want to touch on, or should we, because there are so many of these that we identified as favorites, we wanted to drill into the few that would probably be the highest impact to you who joined us today. But each of these, in the bottom of each of these slides, you'll see like what Emily did for Microsoft Lists here. You'll see in the bottom, the purple thing is where all of these links are to the resources. And I believe we've consolidated them at the end too, correct, Emily?
Absolutely.
You were doing your furious slide beautification as we prepared for this?
Yeah, and I was trying to pop them all in the chat throughout, but after Ask Some Praxis, within usually 1 business day, we also have all these links also posted on our website. So we'll have those there for you too. So
if there's anywhere where you want to drill in a little bit more and self-serve, and then you feel free to bring those questions back to a future Ask Some Praxis, engage with us via the Twitter stream or the chat that is going to stay up. We're happy to be part of it, and we're grateful for you for bringing these ideas to us.
Yep.
So 2 weeks from today, we're going to talk a little bit about a pattern we've seen pretty consistently, especially in project-driven organizations, using templates and automation for collaboration. So a lot of times that's like, how do I provision team sites consistently and easily? How do I automate that process? So that's our primary go-to in there. If you have topics that you want to talk about that are relevant to that, feel free to tweet them at us using the Ask Some Praxis hashtag. And otherwise, we will plan to see you in 2 weeks' time. Anybody have anything else?
Here's to some great releases in 2021.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Woohoo.
Here's to some great 2020 releases in 2020. Sorry,
maybe
it's too
a few
easy.
of those 2019 ones.
That too.
Yep.
2019 releases Service Pack 1 in 2020. Very good. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye.